I haven't eaten in 2 days, the waitress requested the billionaire, not knowing he was about to change her life. What if I told you that the most expensive meal of someone's life cost absolutely nothing? 38-year-old Rebecca wiped down the same table for the third time, her hands trembling slightly as the aroma from the kitchen made her stomach clench with hunger. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, not since her landlord had threatened eviction, and she'd used her last $20 for her daughter's school lunch money. The evening shift at Murphy's Diner was usually slow, but tonight felt different. The autumn rain drummed against the windows as she smoothed her faded uniform, hoping no one would notice the way it hung looser than it used to. She'd perfected the art of smiling through exhaustion, of serving others while her own world crumbled quietly. But sometimes, when you're at your lowest point, life has a way of surprising you. Sometimes, the person sitting in booth 7 isn't just another customer. Where are you watching from tonight? Rebecca had worked at Murphy's Diner for 3 years, ever since her husband passed away and left her to raise 8-year-old Emma alone. The regulars knew her by name, appreciated her warm smile and the way she remembered how they liked their coffee. But lately, smiling had become harder. The medical bills from Tom's final months had drained their savings, and her waitressing income barely covered the basics. She glanced toward booth 7, where a man in his early 40s sat alone, studying the menu with unusual intensity. His clothes were simple but well-made, and there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was used to much nicer places than Murphy's. Richard Hawthorne had actually driven 40 minutes from downtown, seeking anonymity after a particularly brutal day of board meetings and hostile takeover discussions. As CEO of Hawthorne Industries, he was exhausted by the constant performance, the careful words, the calculating smiles. "Good evening." Rebecca approached his table, notepad ready. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Richard looked up, struck by the genuine warmth in her tired eyes. "Coffee, please. Black." He paused, noticing her slight tremor. "Are you all right?" Rebecca's smile flickered. "Just a long day. What can I get you for dinner?" He ordered the meatloaf special, and as she walked away, Richard found himself watching her interactions with other customers. She moved with practiced efficiency, but he noticed the way she avoided looking at the food, the subtle way she pressed her hand to her stomach when she thought no one was watching. 20 minutes later, she returned with his meal. The plate looked perfect, but Richard had lost his appetite. He'd built his fortune by reading people, understanding their struggles, and Rebecca's quiet dignity reminded him of his own mother's strength during his childhood, when money had been scarce. "This looks wonderful," he said, cutting into the meatloaf. "Would you mind sitting for a moment? You look like you could use a break." Rebecca hesitated. "I shouldn't really." "Just for a minute," Richard said gently. "I'm not used to eating alone." Something in his tone made her pause. She glanced around the nearly empty diner and slowly slid into the booth across from him, unaware that this simple act would change everything. Richard took a bite of the meatloaf and pushed the plate slightly toward the center of the table. "This is incredible. I can't possibly finish it all. Would you like some?" Rebecca's stomach betrayed her with a soft growl, but she shook her head quickly. "Oh no, I couldn't. That's very kind, but when did you last eat?" Richard asked quietly, his voice free of judgment. The directness of the question caught Rebecca off guard. Her carefully maintained composure cracked, and for a moment, the weight of her exhaustion showed. It's complicated. My mother used to say that complicated was just another word for hard to talk about," Richard said, cutting another piece of meatloaf. "She worked 3 jobs when I was growing up. I remember watching her give me her dinner, saying she'd already eaten." Rebecca's eyes glistened. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was. She also would have boxed my ears if she knew I was sitting here with good food while someone went hungry." He slid the plate closer to her. "Please. No strings attached, no pity. Just one person sharing a meal with another." The kindness in his voice broke something loose inside her. Rebecca realized she was crying before she felt the tears. "I'm sorry, I don't usually." It's just been really difficult lately. Richard reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. My name's Richard. And you don't need to apologize for being human. Rebecca, she whispered, accepting the fork he offered. The first bite tasted like salvation. As she ate, she found herself talking. About Tom's illness, about Emma's resilience, about the eviction notice tucked in her purse. Richard listened without offering platitudes or solutions, just genuine attention that felt like a lifeline. Emma sounds like an amazing kid, Richard said as Rebecca finished half the plate. She is. She's been so brave through everything. I hate that she has to be brave, you know? 8-year-olds should worry about homework and playground games, not whether mommy's okay. Richard nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. What if I told you that meeting you tonight wasn't an accident? If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Rebecca looked up at him, confusion and hope warring in her tired eyes, completely unaware that her life was about to take an extraordinary turn. Rebecca studied Richard's face, searching for meaning behind his words. I don't understand. What do you mean it wasn't an accident? Richard took a deep breath, weighing his words carefully. I've been looking for someone for a very long time. Someone with real character, genuine kindness. Someone who understands what it means to sacrifice for the people you love. I still don't understand, Rebecca said, but something in his tone made her heart race. 3 months ago, my company decided to create a scholarship program. Not just for academics, but for families who demonstrate extraordinary resilience. We've been quietly observing, looking for someone deserving. He paused, his voice growing softer. Your daughter's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, nominated your family. Rebecca's fork clattered to the plate. Emma's teacher? But how did you? She wrote about a little girl who brings lunch to school for friends who forget theirs, even when her own lunch is smaller than everyone else's. About a mother who volunteers at every school event despite working double shifts. About a family that lost everything but never lost their kindness. The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. She thought about all the times Emma had come home with stories about sharing her sandwich, all the parent meetings she'd attended exhausted but present, all the ways she'd tried to shield her daughter from their struggles. I don't know what to say, Rebecca whispered, her hands trembling. There's more, Richard continued gently. The scholarship isn't just for Emma's education. It includes a housing allowance, medical coverage, and a guaranteed position for you at one of our partner companies if you want it. Rebecca stared at him, unable to process the magnitude of what he was offering. This can't be real. Things like this don't happen to people like me. People like you are exactly who this should happen to, Richard said firmly. Rebecca, you've been surviving on your strength alone for so long. Let someone help carry the load. The diner seemed to fade around them as Rebecca struggled with emotions she couldn't name. Hope felt dangerous after so much disappointment, but the sincerity in Richard's eyes was undeniable. I need to call Emma, she said suddenly. She'll be getting home from her friend's house soon, and she worries when I'm late. Of course, Richard smiled. But first, I have something to ask you. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Rebecca looked up at him, her heart pounding, knowing that whatever came next would determine not just her future, but Emma's as well. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Before you make any decisions about the scholarship, I need to tell you the whole truth. Rebecca's breath caught. What truth? My name isn't just Richard. It's Richard Hawthorne. Hawthorne Industries. He watched her expression carefully. I know that probably sounds overwhelming, but I wanted you to know who you were dealing with. Rebecca's eyes widened as recognition dawned. She'd seen that name in the business section of newspapers, heard it on financial reports. You're that Hawthorne? I'm just someone who remembers what it was like to be hungry, Richard said quietly. What it was like to watch my mother count pennies for groceries. What it was like to want to give back but not know how to do it meaningfully. He opened the envelope and showed her the scholarship documents. This isn't charity, Rebecca. It's an investment in the kind of people who make the world better. Emma's teacher didn't just recommend you for money. She recommended you because she believes your family represents something this world needs more of. Rebecca read through the papers with growing amazement. Full tuition through college for Emma, a monthly living stipend that would cover their rent and groceries, health insurance, and a job offer at the corporate headquarters with a salary that seemed impossible. I can't accept this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why not? Because I haven't done anything to earn something this big. Richard leaned forward. Rebecca, you've been earning this every day for 3 years. Every time you chose to put Emma first, every time you served customers with a smile while your own stomach was empty, every time you maintained your dignity when the world seemed to be falling apart. That's not luck. That's character. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom, can you bring dinner home? I saved my lunch money again. Rebecca showed Richard the message, tears streaming down her face. She's been saving her lunch money to help with groceries. I thought she was just eating less because she wasn't hungry. Richard's own eyes filled with tears. That settles it then. This family deserves every opportunity in the world. Rebecca looked at the papers again, then back at Richard's kind face. If I say yes, what happens next? If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Next, Richard said with a gentle smile, you call Emma and tell her that her lunch money savings just became her college fund. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, watching Emma practice the violin at the kitchen table. The scholarship had provided music lessons along with everything else, and Emma's face glowed with concentration and joy. The eviction notice that had once terrified Rebecca now served as a bookmark in Emma's favorite story collection, a reminder of how quickly life could change. The job at Hawthorne Industries had been a perfect fit. Rebecca's natural empathy and genuine care for others translated beautifully into the company's customer relations department, where she helped families navigate their own difficult times. Richard had insisted she start slowly, adjusting to the new pace of life without financial stress. Mom, Mr. Richard is here. Emma called from the living room, where she'd been watching for his weekly visit. Richard had become an honorary uncle of sorts, someone who understood the importance of found family. He'd lost his own parents years ago and found in Rebecca and Emma the warmth he'd been missing. Tonight, like every Friday, he'd brought Chinese takeout and stories from his week. How's my favorite violinist? Richard asked as Emma launched into his arms. I learned a new song. Want to hear it? As Emma played, Rebecca watched Richard's face transform with genuine joy. The stressed executive she'd met that night at Murphy's had softened into someone who laughed easily and listened intently to an 8-year-old's chatter about school friends and playground adventures. After Emma went to bed, Rebecca and Richard sat on the small balcony overlooking the city. Do you ever think about that night? Rebecca asked. What would have happened if you'd chosen a different restaurant? Richard considered this. I think somehow we would have found each other anyway. Some connections are just meant to happen. He paused. Besides, Murphy's still makes the best meatloaf in the city. Rebecca laughed. Emma wants to take you there for your birthday next week. I'd love that. Full circle. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. Rebecca thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, desperate and exhausted, and marveled at how hope could transform everything. Not just the circumstances, but the very way she moved through the world. Thank you, she said quietly. Not just for the scholarship, but for seeing us. Really seeing us. Thank you for letting me be part of your family, Richard replied. You saved me just as much as I saved you. As the evening wound down and Richard prepared to leave, Emma ran out in her pajamas for one last hug. See you Sunday for pancakes, she called. Rebecca stood in her doorway, watching her friend drive away, grateful beyond words for the night when hunger had led to hope, and hope had led to home. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of kindness, hope, and the beautiful ways that strangers can become family.